In July 2023, retired Air Force veteran and intelligence officer David Grush testified before a congressional hearing that he had submitted confirmed evidence of a decades-long covert U.S. private and governmental UFO crash retrieval program.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No.
Currently, this issue is slowly being pursued by members of Congress.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
While UFO literature over the past 75 years has produced scores and scores of sightings and encounters, documented in enormous volumes, citing named witnesses from all realms of professional, military, and academic background, few researchers have wrote substantially on UFOs crashing and then the government retrieving the crafts and bodies. One researcher who focused on this and produced 7 volumes of reports on crash retrieval cases was Leonard Stringfield.
Leonard Stringfield is a well-known Cincinnati ufologist. He's been investigating UFOs in this area for over 30 years. A prominent UFO consultant to the U.S. Air Force and author of Situation Red, the UFO Siege. Stringfield's cases include more than just sightings.
Stringfield claims that the U.S. government has even recovered alien crafts and bodies and has detailed his findings in several research papers.
These are first-hand bits of information from sources who have seen the craft and or the bodies in government custody. These are people who had the need to know, access clearance to see the bodies, for instance, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or other areas, or did participate in a retrieval operation.
Leonard Stringfield is an unsung hero of UFO research, a name that should be as popular and well-known as any in ufology, but it's not. His credentials are of the highest caliber, and evidence confirms the positions he held and the degree to which official government and military authorities, such as the U.S. Air Force and the FBI, trusted him as a reliable and professional civilian UFO researcher. His work may prove to be the Rosetta Stone to understanding the secret history of the military, government, and private sector operations with retrieving crashed UFOs. Leonard Stringfield's father was a World War I hero. Stringfield himself, though he kept it under the radar, was a sergeant of intelligence for the Army Air Force during World War II. He and 12 others had a close-range encounter with 3 UFOs while flying in a bomber plane near Okinawa, Japan in 1945.
I was in the 5th Air Force serving in an intelligence capacity. I was one of, as I recall, 12 members of my unit flying into Japan. During the flight between Ieshima and Iwo Jima, aboard the plane, encountered what I recall to be 3 unidentified balls of light. It was just a momentary glimpse, really. It wasn't any long duration. There was no sound. Caught my attention was some brilliant light, 3 objects moving sort of obliquely toward and forward to the aircraft that I was on. Got reasonably close. Again, it was hard to judge that. They were brilliant in color and very bright. Maybe 15 feet in diameter. As they approached the aircraft, our plane suddenly dipped and dropped approximately 25 to 50 feet, maybe more, just straight down. In my opinion, it was a result of the proximity of the so-called Foo Fighter.
Stringfield says he was shaken up by the experience and tried to forget about it until 2 trusted people related flying saucer stories to him in 1950. Concerned with what the nature and intent of these craft might be, he established an official organization to systematically study and catalog UFO reports called the Civilian Research Interplanetary Flying Objects, CRIFO, and he began publishing a monthly newsletter named Orbit. After his newsletter caught the attention of radio host Frank Edwards, Stringfield made an appearance, and CRIFO subsequently became the largest civilian UFO research organization in the mid-1950s. As the popularity and profile of CRIFO grew, it also caught the attention of the U.S. Air Force, who the UFO issue had been dumped on and needed to start coming up with answers. Knowing Stringfield's trustworthiness, they formally engaged him in collaborating with their intelligence team and providing them with information about UFO reports. Stringfield was based in Ohio, close by to the infamous Wright Field, which later became Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which to this day is rumored as one of the main bases where UFO research has been secretly conducted.
Do you believe that there are alien bodies and fragments of a spaceship at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base?
I think there had been, according to witnesses who had worked there in the military, of all ranks.
He also became involved with the Air Defense Command in Columbus, Ohio. Air Defense Command gave Stringfield a personal telephone code number to immediately report the most compelling sightings that he received. The Ground Observer Corps in Ohio were also directed to submit all sightings they had directly to Stringfield. Stringfield was later told that if the sightings he called in were confirmed by radar, then the Air Force would scramble jets to intercept, but the outcome of these instances were kept strictly classified. Stringfield wrote that he received personal thank you letters in 1955 from former head of Project Blue Book Edward Ruppelt, and in 1956 from Deputy of Air Force Intelligence Officer Samford, thanking him for his assistance in UFO reporting.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. We have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
Both Air Force officials here and in Washington, D.C. have refused to talk to us about Blue Book.
And it was really a PR setup, because behind the scenes were the technical data, I understand, that they got for not only the crash craft, but other encounters by military pilots, and gun camera footage were analyzed, and those were all secret, and they remain secret today.
Stringfield's open involvement in reporting to and collaborating with Air Force intelligence in regards to UFOs caught the attention of the FBI as he continued to publish his monthly newsletter and discuss his dealings with the Air Force. Thanks to John Greenwald Jr.'s FOIA document request posted on his website, the Black Vault, a cache of FBI documents about Leonard Stringfield were released in 2022. These documents further solidify a picture of the credibility and reliability of Stringfield as a researcher. The FBI had taken note of CRIFO's October 1954 newsletter, where Stringfield detailed a private meeting he had in September of '54 with Lieutenant Colonel John O'Mara, who was the U.S. Air Force Deputy Commander of Intelligence at Wright Field. During the meeting, Stringfield said O'Mara told him that, quote, flying saucers do exist and that past contradictions are unfortunate. The document reports that Frank Edwards warned Stringfield that his mention of the meeting in his newsletter could lead the Air Force to shutting down his operation, to which Stringfield replied, quote, the Air Force can't do anything to me. I'm claiming saucers are interplanetary. The FBI memo says that they were reporting on Stringfield's operations because, quote, they thought that possibly the real purpose of CRIFO might be to gather bits of information about a very secret U.S. Air Force development project. Another section of the FBI documents tell how Stringfield came to the FBI office in Ohio to report and submit letters he'd received from Dr. Ava Reich, the daughter of Dr. Wilhelm Reich, who was imprisoned in 1956. The story of Dr. Reich and the claims his daughter made in her letter to Stringfield are provocative and the subject of a separate video. But what the FBI memo shows us is the integrity of Stringfield. He not only reported to the FBI what had been communicated to him by Dr. Reich because of possible security threats, but also did the same again in 1961 when he got an anonymous call about a Russian nuclear explosion that was supposed to occur, which he had found corroborated by subsequent newspaper reports suggesting the same. Stringfield clearly had a patriotic and civic ideal that he lived up to, and the FBI and Air Force treated him with a great deal of respect. Stringfield can verifiably be called the grandfather of civilian UFO research. In 1957, Stringfield discontinued CRIFO and joined the newly formed Civilian UFO Research Organization, NICAP, headed by Donald Kehoe and started by Townsend Brown. He served as the Public Relations Advisor until 1970. He then went on to be Director of Public Relations and board member of MUFON, and served as the regional investigator for the Center of UFO Studies with Dr. J. Allen Hynek. He also served as the Early Warning Coordinator for the Condon Committee, a research group of over 100 scientists at the University of Boulder, Colorado, that was contracted by the U.S. government to research UFOs from 1967 to 1969. In 1978, he served as the UFO Research Advisor to Grenada Prime Minister Sir Eric Gairy, who was leading a charge to establish a serious UFO research project at the United Nations. When Gairy gave his speech proposal at a 1978 UN conference, Stringfield was in attendance, and with him were Jacques Vallée, astronaut Gordon Cooper, and J. Allen Hynek. It was in 1978 that Stringfield gave a speech at the MUFON conference, announcing that he would be releasing his reports from years of research gathered from witness testimonies about the history of UFO crash retrievals. He published his findings in a 7-volume series from 1978 up until his death in 1994, called UFO Crash Retrievals Status Reports 1 through 7. Before studying the contents of the crash retrieval status reports, it is critical to understand who Stringfield was and to learn as much about his background as possible. His reputation and career in ufology is unblemished, having worked with the most reputable researchers and directly with the Air Force and other government-sponsored UFO research programs. He was the go-to source for reporting UFOs during the heyday of the major UFO flaps, occurring in the early to mid-1950s, and he was trusted by those within the UFO research community and the U.S. intelligence community.
I was told by one intelligence source here some years ago that they had 30 alien bodies underground at Wright-Patterson Field alone, up to 1966.
Understanding his pedigree as a source, we can now look at his crash retrieval status reports and evaluate each case, bearing in mind that the man who put this out there and had 30 years of the highest respectability in UFO research, he was putting himself on the line. Stringfield perhaps doesn't get as much notoriety as some of the other more popular ufologists, which may have actually been done intentionally, as he stated himself. His work is unparalleled and his status is at the highest level of UFO research. Hopefully, in the near future, his work will take on a new place in history as government disclosures approach, and his well-deserved notoriety for a lifetime of research into a stigmatized and even dangerous field of research will be realized.
The whole subject remains to this very day a complete mystery. There's no resolution.
I think there have been periods where there have been attempts to educate the public or spoon feed, as I say, the public with bits of information. So if something suddenly dramatic should happen, there wouldn't be complete alarm. You can imagine what would have happened to the stock market if something were to come out, be announced by the government or world governments or something of this nature. So they refer to it officially as the cultural shock.